Yo, what's the word, everybody? DKB here. Welcome in. Glad to see you guys today. So it's always a great time to talk New York Jets football. Um, Specifically for this training camp, I feel like there's a lot of firsts for things that we haven't necessarily experienced or been used to. Um, in any previous Jets camp that we've had for our last two coaches. Um, Everything from how practices are conducted to essentially the players that we're bringing in having established stars or upcoming stars in certain positions. It's all really a first for us. So there's a few surprises, some question marks, really a lot of things that have come out of this training camp so far that I've been really excited to try to keep up with, and the news just keeps coming. I feel like it's definitely been more rapid than anything that I've remembered, taking a look at in recent memory. So if we want to kick things off, I think the quarterback position is the perfect place to start. My surprise there is actually the backup quarterback camp battle, and not anything that necessarily pertains to Zack Wilson. So when we think about Mike White, when we think about Joe Flacco, I think the assumption was kind of down the middle. A lot of people either expected we wanted to lean on the veteran leadership of Joe Flacco, and therefore Mike White is expendable, and we can pick him up for maybe a third or fourth draft pick, or people have been accustomed to Mike White and this kind of meteoric rise that he had based on some performances last season. Everybody loved the Cincinnati game. It's crazy that he got into the Hall of Fame off of that game alone. Um, and then you got to think about the Buffalo Bills game. That didn't really go well. He played in another game that I don't quite remember off the top of my head, and that one actually went fairly decent for the time that he was in. So Mike White definitely seems like he has some starter potential out here in the league. Is there a benefit to us keeping him on our roster as compared to, flipping him for a pick? You can also make the argument for the Joe Flacco fans that how long is he willing to try to sit behind the scenes? We heard Robert Saleh recently talk him up and mention that he feels like he's still a starter in the league. To me, that's all kind of coach speak. You want to keep your players in as much of a positive light as possible. So it only makes sense that we're speaking him up, what he's been able to do in training camp and the news that's coming out, because we could honestly flip either or. If Joe Flacco feels like there's an open opportunity for him elsewhere, same thing with Mike White, we might as well jump on it and we can make the best of whatever the situation is for who remains in that quarterback room. But, I got to be honest, I think Joe Flacco, there's going to be a transition, right? I think obviously a few years back, he understood that he may not be a top tier starter. Maybe he still feels like he is. He's just not necessarily in that upper echelon. But he's going to have to transition soon where he's realizing like my starting time is only going to come through injuries, and he's going to have to start playing that Ryan Fitzpatrick kind of mold for quarterbacks. And there's nothing wrong with that. So I would personally prefer to go the Joe Flacco route, lean on his veteran leadership, lean on the ability for him to come in and play and dominate right away. And, this is part of the surprise for me in these training camps so far. Joe Flacco has been crushing Mike White. We just brought in quarterback Chris Streveler as well, who used to play with the Arizona Cardinals for a time. But Joe Flacco's been absolutely dominating it. And one of the best things that we recently talked about for us as well is the fact that since we have two great quarterbacks as our backups that are battling it out, is going to make the competition battles at tight end and wide receiver, even offensive line, they're benefiting from all of this the most, because you don't have a quarterback that's out there getting sacked every play, doesn't necessarily know how to run things. They're trying to adjust to the offense. There's a lot that goes into this consistency that we have with our backup room. Mike White, he's been doing it forever. He hasn't had the starting opportunities. Joe Flacco has the Super Bowl pedigree, the playoff aspirations and things that he's been through previously to rely on with his experience. So I would say the biggest surprise is that Joe Flacco is definitely winning it. I thought Mike White might have an edge up, obviously, with him being younger and him kind of coming off a bit of a high rise last season. Um, But yeah, purely the fact that Joe Flacco's been holding it down, and it doesn't seem like it's been even, close. Mike White's had some really good throws, but Joe Flacco's been the most consistent. He's even had a lot of the wild plays that I've seen. He just bombed a 60-yarder, the other day in training camp. So his arm's definitely still well and alive as well. Um, yeah, Joe, as you mentioned, Flacco's been crushing Wilson in practice. So that's something that I've been hearing most recently as well. I think the comparison isn't necessarily the same, right? Joe Flacco hasn't necessarily rotated in with the ones from my understanding. So even though our defense is deep, it's kind of the same philosophy from last season with Zack Wilson. He's facing twos, he's facing threes, he looks great. You throw him in against the ones, and all of a sudden, a lot of people started becoming very negative towards when we drafted Wilson and what he was looking like in preseason. Anything after week one essentially was a little bit of a dud for a while. There wasn't many positive things for a lot of the fan base to say about Zack Wilson, minus that huge Corey Davis throw. Everything in between was more so like we have a scramble here, a play breaks down, we see him make the use of his arm talent. So, quarterback wise, I'm going to go with that being my surprise. Joe Flacco has been most likely the most consistent quarterback. But in terms of the backup battle, he's been, far and away the winner there for us. One thing I did want to test out as well, we'll see if this works out for anybody, but I'm going to drop the link to join as well. If you guys want to jump on and talk as well instead of just jumping in group chat. But aside from that, running back position. I think the biggest surprise for me there is the fact that we've seen dominant performances from almost every member of at least the starting trio. And the starting trio to me is essentially Michael Carter, Breece Hall, and then I was thinking for the longest it was going to be Ty Johnson that ended up kind of running away with that slot. So my prediction for the running back room so far is Michael Carter, Breece Hall. Tevin Coleman, I don't think ends up making it. He's already lost a pretty good chunk of time. He's also trying to come back from injury. He's the veteran there, and it's not really a room where you necessarily need to have a veteran presence to kind of lead the way whatsoever. So I don't see that being one of those arguments for why we should necessarily keep him. But I'm thinking Michael Carter, Breece Hall, Ty Johnson, and I want to say Zonovan Knight really makes it. He's made at least one really big play at every point in practice. So I think my biggest surprise is more so the fact that our two running backs that'll round out the roster probably isn't the players that we thought it would be. Even recently, Robert Saleh's been making comments about LaMichael Pirine and what he's been able to bring and kind of what he offers, right? His understanding of being able to pick up blitzes, his pass blocking assignments, and then just the fact that he does have the biggest body archetype for our New York Jets running back room. He's arguably the best equipped to handle those short distance, conversion running plays that we're going to need this season. And one of the things that interested me was Robert Saleh mentioned, we essentially want an onslaught of running backs to wear down these defenses, right? So this automatically let me know we're most likely looking to rush this ball quite frequently, quite often throughout the duration of these games coming up. And this shouldn't be a surprise to those that have necessarily kept up with a lot of the commentary and things that have been going on. So Zonovan Knight having his huge rushes, and he just ended last practice with I think it was like a 65-yard run up the middle, by the way, that they mentioned. So it's not like an end around. We know he has the speed, he has the ability to work from like a special teams standpoint, which I think is huge for us. We brought in a lot of special teams players that should be able to take a little bit of pressure off Braxton Berrios. Maybe he gets more of a specified role like a punt returner, because most of the guys that we're bringing in are specifically catered towards the kicking game. Dakota Jets. Yes, sir. This is the season for us to take flight. and it looks really good for us. So leading back into that, I think it would probably make the most sense. Let's try to just make this room as young as we can get and fill that up with the most talent that we have there. And that's going to be Michael Carter. That's going to be Breece Hall. That's going to be Ty Johnson, who has shown that he can be dominant in small stretches. So I think ideally for him, it's like somewhere between 4 and 6 snaps a game, at least for rushes, would probably make the most sense for him. Because the receiving game, I mean, I can't think enough how often he was dropping passes last season, and it was directly impacting drives that could have changed the course of a game for us. So Ty Johnson, I think, rounds out the roster with Zonovan Knight at the end. I don't think Tevin Coleman makes it. I don't think Michael Pirine makes it. And I thought we had another guy, but I know we let Austin Walter go to the Raiders. So I'm sure there's another name that I'm forgetting there, but I think those are the 4 that we end up keeping on the roster in that room. Fullback wise, I think is going to be interesting. The only thing that sucks is you don't necessarily get a lot of this news from the training camps. So Nick Baldwin, I've seen Trayvon Wesco. The dude looks absolutely jacked. If you guys didn't see, pictures from when he went up to I don't remember what it was, a mountain range or something in Idaho, I think it was, or sorry, somewhere close to Canada, with Zack Wilson on their little retreat to kind of build chemistry and get some extra work in. Trayvon Wesco looks jacked. Definitely looks like a human wrecking ball. So having him at fullback and that versatility of him being able to be weaponized in the receiving game is amazing. Nick Baldwin is definitely the natural fullback and kind of has the ability to do those natural fullback things, which will obviously be the blocking, the receiving, the running. I don't think Trayvon Wesco necessarily works for us at all as a runner per se. He just looks a little weird. It's a little blockish. So it's up in the air for me. I think my preference would be for us to stick with Nick Baldwin. Let's let Trayvon Wesco kind of fade away. But I do know that it seems like he does have a little bit of chemistry with Zack Wilson, whereas Nick Baldwin coming in that natural fullback position may not necessarily have that same benefit. The entire team looks jacked. They put in the work. No truer statements this offseason. One of the things I was going to make a video about it, and then it just, I don't know, seemed a little bit silly to me. But the transformation of this New York Jets defense and how seriously the players have been taking maximizing their body for what they know, at this point in time. Keep in mind, we're talking about mostly first and second year players. Elijah Moore came back completely shredded. Denzel Mims came back looking like a monster in the wide receiver room. Zack Wilson put on those extra, what did he say? He's playing around 217, 218, and he played around 205 last season. So he put on about 12, 13 pounds of muscle. Michael Carter doesn't look like he necessarily had a transformation, but I think you can see the obvious improvement in skill set. So the running back room, I think, is one of those few players that just, they don't have an overall change necessarily from a body transformation standpoint. Tight end, we mentioned Trayvon Wesco. Everybody else's players that we brought in through free agency in the draft. Offensive line, Mckay Beckton. I still can't get enough of seeing this, it's it's like he went Hulk mode on us for a minute. One day he was this chubby, obese, Thor looking guy. And next moment, I think it was only the span of like 33 days. He looks like the leanest offensive lineman in the room, which is crazy because George Fant has always looked pretty shredded as well. We'll see if we bring in like Dwayne Brown, who we recently talked about today. And while he doesn't look shredded, that man looks like he's just pure muscle. He's a walking ball of muscles. So he definitely stands out as someone that kind of looks like a giant as well. But a lot of players have taken this very serious, and that's just offensively. Carl Lawson looks amazing. Quentin Williams has been retooling his body. JFM looks like he's made huge changes. The linebacker room still looks about the same. It's a little leanish there. But then we've seen the Jordan Whitehead transformation. So there's a lot to love. I think that speaks volumes about what Robert Saleh has been mentioning, and people definitely fully diving into that no gas, no brakes mantra there for what they can personally just do on their own. So that's been amazing to see. Fullback role, though, no real surprises for me. There hasn't been a lot of news for it. I'm going to envision that Nick Baldwin probably wins that out. But I know there's a fair amount of people that love Trayvon Wesco and what he can do in kind of that hybrid role. So, it's a toss up for me. If either one wins, I won't necessarily be upset or happy about it. In the wide receiver room for me, I think there's a couple of surprises. The most recent one would definitely be Denzel Mims and kind of his proclamation that he feels like he's put in the work to be a starting wide receiver. I think it speaks volumes about his understanding that he may not have been putting in quite to the same level in the last 2 seasons. And obviously there's been things out of his control that have factored into that. But I think that's a far cry. Now, I'm not there. I don't see things every day. So, outside looking in perspective, but it either shows supreme confidence in himself or he's a little bit a little bit not in the know that he has Elijah Moore, Corey Davis, Braxton Berrios, and then Garrett Wilson above him. Garrett Wilson, I can see kind of being the wild card, but has he put in the same level of work and commitment as Elijah Moore when he's taking a look at his skill set? Same thing for Corey Davis, and I would probably say look more so to Corey Davis just because we're talking body archetypes. So personally, I would love to see him get flipped just because I love the guy as a person. I want to see him go to a good situation for himself where he could potentially thrive, set his family up for success, and do all of those good things that comes with these secondary contracts. But the the selfish fan in me wants to see him make this roster, and I don't necessarily care this year if he makes it as the number 4 and he cracks Berrios or pushes maybe Garrett Wilson down a little bit, at least for his rookie season. Or if he makes it as number 5 or number 6, which keep in mind, they've been mentioning he's been trying to put in some special teams work as well. So I don't want to say he doesn't know kind of where he's ranking in this wide receiver room because we weren't hearing about special teams work for him before. So he's definitely knowing he needs to make sure he's giving himself every advantage. But I want to see him make the roster because I really believe he could probably be a Corey Davis replacement if we allow him to flourish and if he does take these steps during these joint practices, during these preseason games. And even we haven't necessarily heard anything negative. Mike LaFleur and Robert Saleh has both been saying he's light years ahead of where he was at. He's progressing. We've seen day 1 of training camp where the man went out there and was crushing things. I think he caught 3 or 4 balls. One of them was really just a drop. Or I'm sorry, I think it was a good play by one of the defensive backs that was covering him. And if I remember correctly, it was DJ Reed on somewhat of an underthrow on a comeback route. But regardless of all that, I really think he can replace Corey Davis. He can finish out essentially his 4-year deal. We'll get maximum returns on him. We maybe up his trade value a little bit more because I think maybe we oversold his trade value a little bit. I know I've been saying that based on what Joe Douglas has done before, maybe we can still see a mid-round pick, right? A 4th, maybe a 5th. That might be a pipe dream because something that didn't hit me was, in comparison's sake, the Patriots had Nikhil Harris, I think it was, their former first-round pick. They flipped him for a 7. Bill Belichick has also been long known for being able to get crazy value out of players that he sees going on a downfall, doesn't fit the system, whatever. So seeing that they were only able to get a 7th for him now makes me think maybe we only end up seeing a conditional round pick for us, a 6th or a 7th based on playing time. Because Denzel Mims also did go a later round than him, and he probably does, in my opinion, have better measurables. But still, they've both been very underwhelming, and Nikhil Harris actually has better production than Denzel Mims does. So Joe Douglas will really have to sell it, or will really have to cater to a desperate team that maybe the Patriots weren't willing to wait on. You guys know the Bears have been my team that I've been preaching, us seeing some news come out about because they really can use the work. So I don't know. It's up in the air. I think one of the other major surprises too is that the undrafted free agents that we picked up, they've been lighting up the practice field quite a bit. I mean, to the point where we're not even talking about, and I'm sure it's happening consistently, Elijah Moore dominating practices. We're not talking about Garrett Wilson and some of these highlight reel catches that he's been doing. We're talking more so about, and forgive me because I'm not remembering all the names off the top of my head, but I think it's Isaac Charles, Rashard Davis, Keyshawn Abram was even getting some work in there. So we have a lot of these undrafted free agents that are coming in specifically with special teams backgrounds as well, but they've been lighting it up. Not only has it been deep catches and bombs being thrown to them, we're hearing about slants that some of these guys are taking to the house, and just the facet that they've been able to pick up this playbook as quick as they have to be able to do this. And I talked about it slightly when comparing it to Zack Wilson as well, that Denzel Mims, that he wasn't able to take advantage of the same opportunities, I think speaks volume. So either Mike LaFleur simplified his offense, and we talked about this maybe like 2 months back, right? He cut out a lot of the fat that was happening there in order to streamline things for Zack Wilson heading into season 2. One of the most underplayed factors about what's going to happen for Zack Wilson is that we want the instinctual part of his ball game to come to fruition, and for him not to necessarily have to overthink everything, especially because he's kind of one of these, study geeks that goes in there and he wants to understand everything that's happening literally on every play. And one of the things that Mike LaFleur highlighted as a key point to this was that, let's say on a pass play where we're only looking at the right side of the field, Zack Wilson's still worried about what's happening on the left. And this is a play that's specifically drawn up to where literally there's nothing the defense can do that will make you want to look left. So there's things like that, little nuances that they want to iron out with Zack Wilson. Things like that are very important to me. So I think the processing part, obviously he's going through his reads and everything better, but I think just that understanding of we're calling this play for this specific purpose, and kind of how that translates to the field early on for him, especially since we're facing the AFC North and we know every one of those defenses are formidable. I think this gives us a very early, indicator, a very early sign, especially for essentially the first quarter of our season, where Zack Wilson truly is in his development. I won't say that's the make or break point for, okay, we've made the right pick or not. But this should definitely be leaps and bounds, very steady improvements for him. Being able to complete these short passes, being able to continue lighting people up in the intermediate game, and then being able to take advantage of some of these play actions and bootlegs and things that we're going to do for him to kind of ease the load there. How many tight ends are they keeping? If we keep Trayvon Wesco, I think we honestly see 4. I don't know if it makes the most sense to keep 4. But I mean, that would technically be what would make you 4, right? Because Nick Baldwin wouldn't be on the roster. I would assume he'll go to the practice squad or find a different team. Trayvon Wesco would essentially be that hybrid player that's taking on that 4th spot as a tight end. My only concern would be, I think, for where we need the most depth, we have 2 players that don't have health concerns already in CJ and Tyler Conklin. We have Jeremy Rucker, who just came off the list. He's getting acclimated to practices, catching up with the offense, making sure he understands his playbook to the point that they would expect right now. I don't know if we need necessarily a 4th player. This would also probably play into me, favoring Nick Baldwin a bit. And to be honest, Trayvon Wesco is he's essentially like a specialized role on the team if we end up keeping him. So you can almost make the same argument for him that I've made for why we might not keep Justin Hardy in the cornerback room. Do we want to keep a player that's not necessarily going to see the field 100% of the time, and he's really only going to be working out of a specialized role? Or would you rather take the player who can have a little bit more of a higher upside somewhere else? Maybe we want to keep 5 running backs instead of keeping 4. Maybe we want to make sure we give ourselves an allowance to have 7 players in the wide receiver room instead of 5 or 6. Those are the kind of conversations and decisions that I think are going to be really important for some of these positions that aren't necessarily going to be extremely vital for us to have the most depth in. Green Ghost, I'm right with you. Let's go. Joint practices are coming up very soon, by the way. I want to say the Falcons was the first joint practice that we have, right? And one of the things I also want to keep an eye on coming up is the Deion Jones situation. We've been continuously kind of adding pieces here and there. I think that continues to be a trend. And so knowing that Deion Jones potentially can be added to the room that already has CJ, it already has Quincy, it already has Kwan. Um, we might end up redshirting our rookies there once again, which is a really crazy thought because even though we picked them up in the 5th round and it's not one of those premium positions where you say, okay, I absolutely need to get a starter out of here. This was the very beginning of this safety experiment that Robert Saleh and Jeff Ulbrich are kind of working through. They really love the aspect of having somebody that can hit hard and can cover the field within a ridiculous amount of speed. And they've showed previous instincts to be able to make plays. And that's true of Jamian Sherwood. That's true of Hamza Nabzardine, who actually came over kind of being utilized in a linebacker role anyways, back in his Florida days. So it's not as much of a far-fetched kind of thought for him, but we also had the recent move with Kai Nakua. He goes to linebacker coming from safety. So, and if I remember correctly, Kai Nakua ran like a 4.39 or something. So he has the speed. We've seen him make a lot of crazy plays in training camp last year too. So, I think it's a position where that's one where they say, I need depth all throughout, right? Because we're playing guys that are at a lighter weight and we're having to come down and kind of crash the field in certain situations. And if not, just the nature of how we want them to cover sideline to sideline, there's a lot more risk for injury to that specific unit. So having that depth is super critical there. It's an interesting situation. I don't know if they'll keep it up. I want to say maybe by next year is maybe where we potentially see it stop. Or it could just be a position where he says, hey, this is where I'm willing to take all the risk at. If I can get these guys developed, which is essentially his bread and butter, then this allows us to make better use of all of our premium assets, right? Why do I need to go and get a Tremaine Edmonds in the 1st round if I can go and I can grab a Fred Warner, I can get an undrafted free agent, I can pick up these lower tier guys and I can get them to perform to our standards. So we'll see. At this point, I have full faith in the training staff, which, by the way, has added a new coach. It's a video that I was going to drop at some point, probably later today or early tomorrow. We brought in a new coach from Toledo. I don't remember the name, but essentially there was an offensive assistant position that we've been waiting on this entire time. They wanted to add somebody to the pipeline. They're expecting Mike LaFleur to go when we trimmed a lot of the fat with people that were working with Zack Wilson last year, and just making sure we kind of have this pipeline of, okay, our offensive coordinator leaves. We've had a guy in the system for 2-3 years learning behind him. Let's get him established. And then we have somebody that can transition very smoothly. So, Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh have kind of been the perfect CEO-minded complements to each other, because it's very easy to understand the moves when they're made. There hasn't been many pickups, whether in free agency, whether the draft, outside of that first year for JB, where you say, I don't understand the reason or the premise for this move. It's a position of need, or it's a premium position we want to strengthen, or it's somewhere where, Robert Saleh seems like he needs to add those resources. So, if you want to base it off the most recent draft, based on the history, wasn't expecting Sauce Gardner whatsoever at number 4. I was barely even expecting him at 10, but it would have made a lot more sense there. But Robert Saleh came out and mentioned, the idea that we don't value cornerbacks is crazy. We obviously need them because the rushers and the cornerbacks go hand in hand. If you don't have anybody that can cover for, 2-3 seconds, then people like Brady and even normal people, they're going to have a field day on you. And vice versa. If you don't have anybody that can rush the pass, there's only so long that cornerbacks can cover the entirety of the field. So it's nice to kind of get a peek into the mindset. I think there's still things that are being clarified, obviously, because this whole coaching staff is still relatively new with each other as well. There's a lot of coaching connection ties, but not people that have necessarily worked with each other for extensive time outside of LaFleur and Saleh. And obviously they're on, two different sides of the fields per se, even though Robert Saleh's kind of attended to everything there. But it's interesting all the same. I got to take a look into some more info about the Toledo guy anyways. All I know off the top of my head is he has a defensive background. So it's definitely going to end up impacting the offensive assistant room and just the offensive coaching staff as a whole, because he's going to be able to come in from the standpoint of, here's how I would attack you guys as a defense. Here's how we can, counteract that situation. So I kind of like that little bit of balance there, but obviously he's new, he's coming in, he'll have a voice, but how much leeway is he going to have to, make an impact right away there? Kind of diving back into things though, surprises. In terms of the wide receiver room, I think that's the biggest thing for me. Can Denzel Mims make enough of an argument to stay on this roster so that we can see what happens this following season with Corey Davis? If he underwhelms again, I can definitely see us letting him go. We don't really have to worry about too much dead money in this situation at all. Can Denzel Mims replace him? And then these undrafted free agents. The only worry there for me is that, and Jeff Smith is a player that was very hot as well, and then he's kind of trailed off in training camp here. Are we using our 5th and 6th spots specifically for kind of special teams aces, and then we also want them to offer some kind of versatility in the passing game? Or is it more so about special teams? Because we've seen that we've definitely made use of these guys, right? Our 5th and 6th, Jeff Smith last year, DJ, they were able to go in, they were able to play and, make 10 to 15 receptions based off, a couple, I think they played around 180 snaps maybe. But do we want that versatility, right? Do we want another huge, crazy, big body guy? Do we want a route running aficionado? Do we want somebody that's essentially just a chain mover that's in there? And will they have designated roles, or are we kind of looking for these athletic monsters and we'll kind of see what they can do and come up with a coaching plan from there? Offensive line wise, I wouldn't necessarily say there's any surprises other than we haven't necessarily made any crazy moves yet. The Dwayne Brown visit that's happening today and then him coming through the green and white scrimmage was welcome news. But again, as I talked about in my video, I'm only curious about it in terms of him not being a very versatile piece. So we would have to understand as fans that he's coming in purely as a left tackle. We did bring back who was it, Connor Williams, I think, to our guard situation, but otherwise it seems like we were comfortable with Nate Herbig, who we picked up from the Eagles. Dan Feeney's essentially playing our emergency center but guard combo back up there. And then again, tackle Chuma Edoga. Chuma Edoga is a guy that kind of reminds me a lot of Brandon Shell, except a little less talented. And then, of course, we had, Greg Snat holding down the fort. And then there was another guy, Hermans, that's been around the team for a while, too. But it just feels like it's time that we had somebody like a Max Mitchell come in, and hopefully whoever we pick up in free agency, either as cuts come or if we do make a deal with Dwayne Brown or whoever, it may be. It feels like time that we actually replace these guys. Not only are they getting up there in age a little bit, but they've kind of made it through multiple regimes. They haven't really ever been serviceable for us. I talked about it before. Conor McDermott, he's always allowed at minimum 2 to 3 sacks almost every game, which is pretty crazy considering he's usually coming in on spot duty. But sometimes it's come in at critical downs for us. So he's directly impacted and stalled certain drives. Chuma Edoga, I think, just hasn't necessarily ever put it together. He was a guy that I liked for a while. I've seen some of the athletic traits. From what I remember, he had a pretty good 3-cone drill. And I think it was more so about him working on zone blocking, which is something that's pretty big for us. He seems like he was a little bit better in kind of mano-a-mano situations. So I think the fact that we seem relatively comfortable with our offensive line group, which obviously we've made huge additions to, it's a complete change from anything that we've had in the past. And we have players that are relatively healthy, asterisks on the tackle position with Fant and Mckay Beckton, but now we don't necessarily have to worry. Laken Tomlinson has a great history. Conor McGovern has a great history. Elijah Vera Tucker, he's coming in not having any concerns. Nate Herbig, he's been a little worrisome to me, but he's been able to play for stretches. So it's not like he's coming and he's leaving. And then Dan Feeney, he's kind of the ultimate like Viking guy on our roster. So that if there's a way he can make it onto the field, he definitely will. So I think in terms of surprises, at least on the offensive side, that's been the majority of them. Defensively, there's a lot more interesting situations going on. I think the camp battles are a lot more interesting there because there's no hard dead set. I'm cutting this guy. He's obviously been underperforming. There's been burst and there's been long-term impacts for a lot of people. Everything from the defensive line right on up to the safety room there. So I'm thinking maybe I'll do a live maybe for that tomorrow and kind of run through some of my observations from the defensive side. There's still a lot of interviews and a lot of stuff from the players that I want to catch up on from these last 2 days that I haven't been able to really dive into. I've been hearing some interesting quotes, but I wanted to kind of fact check all the things. But yeah, man, let's go Jets. I think this has been one of the best training camps that I've been able to witness and hear news from and see, and just the talent level. We haven't had a talent level like this since our playoff teams, and it's a stark difference because we're talking about having talent in terms of a lot of youngsters. We're not a veteran-led team anymore. We're a team that can literally grow for the next 3 to 5 years. And if we do it right, we can dominate. So I'm very excited about that. I'll leave a little bit of time out here just in case you guys have any questions, any ideas, any thoughts, anything that you guys have been hearing that you want to talk about. Keep in mind, I did throw the StreamYard link in there earlier if you guys want to jump on as well, and we can kind of chop it up face to face. But otherwise, I think I'm going to hang out here for a little bit more. We'll see what comes up real quick, and then I will call it a wrap for a bit. While I'm waiting to see if anything else comes in, I would probably say, in terms of Zack Wilson, just so we can say that we talked about him a little bit, his leadership and kind of what he's done this offseason, I would say, kudos to him. We've highlighted it at certain points, but I really think what he's done has been something that's really setting him apart from anybody else that we previously had. Obviously, there's a lot more to the team and being able to have success than just saying that our main guy is a leader. But he truly almost feels like he's a 6-7 year veteran with some of the things he's doing, and not necessarily a player that's trying to find his way through on a second season after having a very rough rookie year. He's a guy that understands where he failed. He's a guy who had an immediate game plan. So it's not that the coaches were setting specific milestones or specific things that they wanted to work on. Obviously, that happened. He also had his quarterbacks coach, John Beck, that was able to come in and see firsthand as well. So they also had a game plan. But he's a guy that specifically is called out in multiple press conferences. Here's the things that I were looking to go and make sure I can get right for this new season, and things that I were confident would get turned around based on other things that I'm working on. And he set his sights on doing that. During this whole period of his working on specific areas of his game, he's also been able to go and reach out to his buddies, stay in constant contact, bring them out to things, as well as host them for quite a few things, and really bridge the gap between a lot of these new players that have come in that he's going to be working with, and becoming that more solid with players that he's expecting to grow with, for hopefully the next 5 to 10 years. I mean, I would love to hear Zack Wilson, Elijah Moore, Garrett Wilson, and even Denzel Mims names for the next 4 years after, some extra contracts come in. I would love to hear Jeremy Rucker's name continue to shine. Mckay Beckton protecting him, along with Elijah Vera Tucker. So this aspect of him making sure that he's not letting people, go to the wayside. He's even working with the defense to certain degrees and making sure they stay incorporated, whether that be through some of these games and things. And he's essentially become, very early on in his sophomore year, that on-field player coach that a lot of teams talk about. CJ Mosley obviously is the biggest example for the defensive side of the team. Michael Carter is the other big guy on offense. Robert Saleh's already mentioned, essentially expect him to be a team captain. His leadership goes beyond just the running back room. And you can obviously tell that he studies and puts in a lot of work for his other teammates. Some of the insights that he gives us during these press conferences and some of these ideals that he has about the other positions, how the offense is expected to work, what Mike LaFleur is expecting and looking to operate, speaks volumes about him. So, I can't really say enough. Very excited once again. I think we're going to not only do damage in some of these training camps, which I think will ultimately be that boost that we need for some of these players we want to trade. I'm also looking forward to some of these sneaky insights that we'll get. Again, when we're talking the Falcons, Deion Jones, we'll see if there's anybody else that maybe can be added to the offensive line that they maybe aren't so hyped about that we see something in. Maybe there's a wide receiver that we find that replaces one of these undrafted free agents. But I think the biggest positions we'll end up seeing, personally, I would say keep a look at backup quarterbacks. I would say keep an eye on running backs because we've essentially added one every year since Joe Douglas has been in. So we're building this pipeline. Running backs, backup quarterback, offensive line. I would say defensive line is always going to be a priority. So, just keep that in mind. Linebacker. And then I really get the feeling that we're comfortable. The coaching staff is comfortable with the safety room. Having that combination of like Whitehead, Elijah Riley, LaMarcus Joyner, who all reports indicate, the coaching staff feels like he can be one of the better free safeties in the league based on what they've seen him do for 2 seasons before with the Rams at that position, and getting the chance to go back there, especially with the talent we surrounded him at. And then having Jason Pinnock in the wings behind him, I think is clutch. So, my only question would be if we carry any more than those 4. I think ideally it's probably going to end up being 5 because I really see probably 5. I'm stuck between 5 or 6 players in the cornerback room. I think it really comes down to if we want to keep Guidry, or with kind of cool moving to safety. Do we want to keep maybe a Will Parks in the safety room? And I think that's going to be more so a forward-thinking move. We're going to have these guys come in the safety room because we're expecting to make significant contributions as we get a little bit younger next year. But those are my thoughts for today, guys. I wanted to kind of keep it to the offense for the most part. We'll dive into some more defensive things, I think, again, tomorrow. I appreciate you guys dropping by for all the things. It's always a blast talking Jets football with everybody. If you haven't left it on the live chat, drop any of your takes, any of your questions in the comments when this ends. If nothing else, though, again, I appreciate all the support. I'm looking forward to dropping some more videos. There may be an opportunity for somebody I know that's dropping into training camp, and they might even be attending some of these joint practices from what I heard. So I might be able to get some live footage and some insights there, which will be really cool. Other than that, though, I will catch you guys again. I'm going to try to get out of this heat now. Maybe get a basketball game in if we can. But again, appreciate everything, and I'll catch you guys again. Peace.